So everyone, if you do not know her, this is Rachel Campos-Duffy. She's an American television personality. She first appeared in 1994 as a cast member of the MTV reality television series The Real World San Francisco before moving on to work as a television host. She has been on Fox and Friends. She's been on The View. She has been on just really any major talk show. You can look it up, and Rachel Campos-Duffy has probably been on it. She is a devout Catholic, and actually I got to meet one of her daughters at a Young Americans for Freedom conference back in October. So that was very good. But yes, with that, please welcome
Lucia?
Rachel Campos-Duffy on Evangelization.
You met my daughter Lucia?
I did, yes.
Good. I have many daughters. I wanted to check which one.
Well, Miss Campos-Duffy, the title of Zoom was Evangelization and Culture. So I just want to ask you, could you kind of you're someone who is a big TV personality, but Catholicism is it's not like the thing you're centered on doing. It's not your career. It's just another like part of your personality, but you still use that as a way to evangelize. So I was wondering if you could just kind of like give us just kind of an overview of how do you do that in this kind of culture that's like very against Catholicism in culture, and that's much more about it being like a private thing. How do you manage to do that while continuing to be like someone who's a very popular TV personality and goes on like all sorts of talk shows that we've been watching?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on today. It's really an honor to be here. And you talk about culture. How amazing that you're using this new pandemic Zoom culture to reach out to other young people, and that's exactly the kind of culture making that we need to do as Catholics if we want to evangelize our world. And by the way, I'm gonna walk because I want to close my door because I have a busy house, and if I don't close this door, I guarantee someone's gonna walk in. Someone's gonna want me to do something. So anyway, I locked the door.
So you asked such a great question because, I'm on Fox. Been working for them for many years, and politics is sort of the name of the game at Fox. But really, and my husband was a congressman for almost 10 years, and so I'm also a political spouse and very, aware of all the issues in politics. But politics is really downstream from culture, and what I mean by that is that culture happens first, and then politics tries to catch up to the culture, to what people want. So if we want to move our society and then we need to be in the culture and moving the culture towards a more Christ-like vision of the world. And it's really hard because especially with technology and social media now, those industries, used to be we just worried about Hollywood. Hollywood almost seems kind of insignificant, right? Next to big tech. And big tech, just like Hollywood, is rabidly liberal, rabidly secular, rabidly anti-Christian. And so we have a lot more to contend with. And so what I always tell young people is, you can't just, and I tell adults as well, you can't, just criticize culture and mock it. And think you're above it, right? Because there's a lot of conservatives who think I'm just too good, I'm too intellectual, I'm too above it all. We better be in it. So if you're not, The View was such a great example. You brought up that I was on The View. I've done The View. I've been a guest co-host probably 25 times. And whenever I do The View, I always put it up on my social media, let people know that I'm going to be on it. And usually conservatives will either scoff and say, why would you lower yourself to get on a show like that? Or they'll say, I'll pray for you. Why are you doing that? Why are you going into the lion's den? Because the women on The View are so liberal, and it's hard to be the conservative there. But if we're not at the table, then we don't have a voice. And the truth is, the culture can look like it's all so liberal because the gatekeepers of the culture are liberal. But the consumers of culture, half of them at least, are just like us. They're more conservative minded, they're Christian, they go to church, or they
want to go to church more. They're people who are really trying to live a good life and do what's right. And so if we don't put ourselves into the lion's den, as those people would say to me, then those people will never be able to see themselves reflected back at them and edified by the culture. And so I think maybe because I came out of pop culture, you mentioned that in 1994 I did a reality television show called The Real World. It was actually the very first reality television show, in American pop culture. And it is from that, there was a spin-off series. My husband had also done a season in another city of The Real World. And then there was the spin-off where he and I both met. And so we are actually, our claim to fame, the very first ever reality TV couple. And we're definitely the most fertile because we have 9 children. And so that is our background. And so I think it's because we come out of popular culture that we don't scoff at it, we don't mock it. We actually understand the power of it. And it is powerful, and it is where most kids are getting their information and even their news. My daughter had a really fantastic article in the Federalist about Snapchat, and I learned so much about these things because I have teenagers and college students, in my family. And my daughter started to talk to me about what the feed was from Snapchat. So I had assumed, because my husband was on Snapchat for a while, and he would communicate with his congressional team through Snapchat. I just thought it was, you send messages to people, they disappear. I didn't like the idea as a mom, but that's what I thought it was. It wasn't until my college student, my daughter told me, no, there's a feed, and it's a news feed and it's video feeds. And you don't get to actually suggest what you're interested in. It's all curated for you through Snapchat tech people who are obviously very liberal, Silicon Valley type people. And so I started to look at the Snapchat feed, and it is just the most outrageous stuff. I had no idea this was being fed into Snapchat, where so many of my kids, at least the ones I can't control, are on Snapchat, and so many other American kids are getting this information. And so they're absorbing these videos of transgenderism and some really bizarre sexual arrangements and families and things, and they're getting that fed to them almost through osmosis. They don't ask for it, they don't request these videos, it just comes through their feed. And so it's this really passive ingestion of all these ideas that probably are very contrary to what their families and their morals and their church are teaching them. And that's a really powerful thing. And so we need to be in culture, but we also need to be aware of what culture is out there, especially as older parents myself. I wouldn't know that if it wasn't for young people telling me that, my own daughter telling me that. So I always try and stay up on those kinds of things. I always try and stay up on pop culture so I can talk about it and sort of put a Catholic worldview and perspective on these topics when they come up for me when I'm on a television show and being asked to give my analysis on it. So
Absolutely.
That's your question. I'm sorry I went off on that, but
No, that's perfect actually. Yeah, I had a friend. I don't use Snapchat, fortunately, but I had a friend on it, and she sent me an ad that was by Planned Parenthood, and it wasn't even about anything like they offer. It wasn't even about their services. It was just some. I'm not even going to. The ad is like so bad. I'm not even going to repeat what it had in it. But it was just something like so hypersexualized, and I had no idea too, because I don't use Snapchat. I'm on a few other social medias, but it's one of the ones that my parents make sure that I'm off of. But yeah, absolutely, I totally agree with the point. Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to mention my dad worked on The Real World in Europe. He was I think he was a PA at the time, but so yeah, he always brags it was the first reality show. Yeah.
Was it the one in London?
I guess I guess the one in London. I don't remember, but I know it was in Europe. But yeah,
Interesting. I dated one of the show on the
I hope
London.
it wasn't George.
Well, that's my dad in still in doing film or television.
He is, yeah, he is.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome. That's so interesting that you say that, because I have a son who is studying cinematography. And I think sometimes a lot of conservative parents would rather their kids be doctors or lawyers or, something else. And for me, I'm really proud that he's going into cinematography. And I think that more parents need to be open to the arts. It isn't just being on television, but
Mhm.
people behind the camera, the people in the executive suites are making so many of the decisions about what we ingest, what we take in culturally. And so it's so important for us to not,
Yeah,
not is that those kinds of professions are,
yeah,
the art is important, and in a lot of ways more important than.
yeah. I agree. Yeah, completely.
Yeah, I was reading an article a few days ago. I forget who it was by. I think it was actually by one of like the really outrageous liberal news sites like Huffington Post or Vox. But the article made a really good point that for once in a blue moon that are like if you want to have an influence in culture, it's no longer like doctors and lawyers that are the ones who are like having this like these like big middle class jobs. It's the it's the artists and it's the cinematographers and the filmmakers that are starting to really influence culture even more than like the professors and doctors and lawyers, as you mentioned, are. Yeah, so I definitely agree with your point.
That's absolutely true. Now, professors and teachers have they do have a very powerful impact. I know I'll get hired by, you mentioned Young America's Foundation, and other organizations will hire me to come in and speak at a university. And it's always one of my favorite things that I get to do is go and speak to college students, and not just to educate them on what's going on, but also just to let them know they're not alone, because so many of them feel just really isolated on campus because there's so much censorship and so much antagonism towards religious people, conservative people. But you know, that's 1 hour that I get, if I'm lucky, to get, anywhere between, you know, 25 and 500 people to come see me. But these professors have these students, for hours a week, for an entire semester, an entire year. And same with, public schools now, which have become so indoctrination machines. And so those professors, those teachers have an enormous influence on the next generation. I'm sure you guys have been following this story that just came out about Teen Vogue, where the editor was fired, a young editor, a liberal. She used to work for Axios news agency, definitely a liberal African American woman who was selected to lead Teen Magazine, Teen Vogue. I'm sorry, Teen Vogue, and by the way, Teen Vogue is an indoctrination propaganda machine. They several years ago they decided they didn't want to do much fashion and makeup anymore, and they are and beauty. They're pushing a very, very left wing woke agenda. Lots of LGBTQ, transgenderism. Planned Parenthood is very heavily promoted in Teen Vogue as well. But in any case, this young editor comes on board, and she had written some tweets that were considered offensive, and they fired her. And it's an interesting story because she apologized. She's clearly a liberal and regrets what she had written when she was I think she was like 17 years old when she wrote these tweets. But my concern is that the message that is being sent to a lot of kids isn't, we hope the message is don't write something racist, right? That would be a very fine message to come out of this story. But I think the story is much deeper than that. And I think the message that's really being sent to a lot of young people is don't put your point of view out there. If it doesn't meet these standards that are being set by the ideological left, who take roles so many things. They control corporations, they control universities, they control so many, they control Hollywood. And so if you want to enter any of these professions or institutions, your opinion will be vetted and you will be judged by that, not just if it's offensive, but just having a different point of view, one that's countercultural. And so what I'm seeing that is very disturbing to me as a parent and just as an American is that so many young people are self-censoring. They're afraid to give a different opinion. They're afraid to say anything that is counter to the established narrative. They're afraid now to speak their mind and question things and make, sometimes when you're exploring ideas and you want to speak freely, things don't always come out the way they're supposed to be, and they're afraid they're going to get punished for that, in a professional way. They might not get into the university they want. They might not get the job they want. Somebody might say they're offended, and therefore, you get smeared as a racist. And so what young people are doing is just, who don't have the, approved point of view, is that they're simply not talking. And what happens when we self-censor is we literally stop thinking for ourselves. Eventually, at first, when you first start self-censoring, you have your own thoughts. You just are choosing not to say them. And eventually, and this is what totalitarian governments and those ideological strains, Marxism, socialism, communism, what they know is that eventually, if you self-censor enough, you just start thinking for yourself. And I'm absolutely convinced that that is what the left wants, that is what cancel culture is truly about. It's about getting you to submit. And I would say to you all that the pandemic is just as troubling, because so much of what's happened during the pandemic has been about conformity, about submitting, about taking at face value what some bureaucrat says. And so much of what they claim to be doing, which is basing everything on science, is not based on science. And even scientists and doctors that I know were punished very early on in the pandemic for questioning some of the guidelines, for suggesting that there were other treatments that could have been, better. So we are living in a really, really dangerous era. Something that, if you're your age, I'm so frightened, because it may seem normal to you. But I can tell you that when I was a kid, these things were not happening, and that things are moving very rapidly. And it's truly kids like you who are, more informed, who are interested in learning what things were like in America pre-pandemic, pre-woke culture. That's where we need to go back to. And it's not regressive. It's actually very liberating to be able to say what you think and not be punished for it. And and also we're living in an age of where there's no grade. So this young editor, again, I'm not a big fan of her at all, not a fan of her publication, but she did apologize for saying some things that, probably weren't very nice, and could definitely, some of it, be interpreted as racist. Although when I read it in the context of her age and what she was trying to say, I think she was just trying to be funny. But some people could take it that way. But the point is, she apologized, and this is an age of no forgiveness as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it becomes, it's getting a lot worse. I saw that same news story, and she's apologized multiple times. It's not just like, one time. These Twitter posts, which she posted when she was 17 years old, and now she's 24. And so this is 17 years ago at this point. And so she's now a young woman, and she apologized, when these things first came up, and then, they came up again, and she apologized again. And then, these Twitter posts resurfaced once again now, when she's supposed to be getting this, big promotion to become the editor-in-chief. And, she apologized again, but now it's too late. But I mean, the things which she said, I agree with your stance that, it was a little bit more just, humorous with her state in life and what she was trying to convey. But Now it's also just like, if you even say that there are only, there's only boys and girls, or if you say even just that thing, it's like, us as in the generation that we're living in, the times that we're living in right now, that is seen as being counter to this, to this culture, which
Yes.
isn't able to see that there are boys and girls, and that men can't get pregnant and stuff like this. And it's very it's very sad to see that a lot of kids also have to feel like they need to kind of bend under this pressure, along with, like, Black Lives Matter. This was something that we were talking about just the past couple of days in our group with the a few back when the George Floyd thing started happening. Everyone was posting the black squares on their Instagrams and
Right.
stuff like that, and it was like, people felt like they had to post it. It's like they had to support Black Lives Matter, even though we disagree with the agenda of Black Lives Matter. We disagree with what they are promoting. We don't agree with that. With their stances on upending the social and family life and stuff like that. But they felt like if they didn't say anything, then they would lose friends. They would, be they would be seen as being racist or bigoted, and so it's very difficult, I think, especially for us now, because we do have a lot of pressure to show that we aren't racist or we aren't bigoted. But it's like they're twisting words, because you no longer know what is
Yeah.
racist or sexist. So it's
Sure.
it's very difficult. So how exactly have you kind of tackled that issue? And do
Yeah.
you have any sort of advice for us when we're trying to just say things which are pretty obvious, I think, but
Yeah.
other people might not see it as being obvious?
Yeah. Or you say something that is just the truth. And now the truth can be, interpreted as being homophobic or
Mhm.
transphobic or whatever. I mean, you saw even, liberal icons like J.K. Rowling stand up for women. Really, I mean, she's a feminist, and she could see that the trans movement was erasing women and femininity and biology. And even someone as powerful culturally as J.K. Rowling was attacked viciously. All the little actors in Harry Potter turned against her. I mean, it was really remarkable to see the kind of abuse that she took. And here she is, the most powerful woman. I mean, outside of the Queen, I don't know who else is more powerful in Great Britain than J.K. Rowling. Maybe Meghan Markle was for a while, but now it's J.K. and the Queen. And J.K. Rowling was basically canceled by the people that she made into stars, and someone who was, she was beloved by, a whole generation of young readers, and yet she was punished. Now she had the power and the money to withstand that, but most people, a 15-year-old, a 17-year-old, a college student, a young professional just starting out, they don't have the power to do that. To take on a corporation, to take on, one of the biggest, I mean, the trans movement, they are mean girls. If you've ever seen a mean girl club, they are the meanest of the mean girl clubs, and they will come after you. And those who have stood up to them have had to have, spines of steel, because they really, tried to cancel your entire livelihood. And so it's really tough. But that movement in particular, how can we let that stand? I mean, as a woman, um, that we would allow a movement like that to erase women's sports, that I would, now need to. I think there's a school in New York now, by the way, who says that you can no longer say mother and father. They've trained their kids in the school now to just say parents, or I don't know, they have some other term for it. There's all kinds of ways that they're trying to force us to use language that they approve of. And some of it is anti-science, which is ironic in the year of the pandemic when everything is about, supposedly about science. You guys are living in an incredible era. You guys are, I think that we're going to look back on this era of yours, this generation, and we're going to see, if you were able to stand up ultimately to what I think is a very totalitarian culture that is starting to overtake at an alarming speed your culture and youth culture. And if you look at even the case when we were talking about the editor of Teen Vogue, it was really two groups that forced her out. One were the young staffers. So here she was the boss, and the young staffers united, all these wokesters united to kick her out. And I know that's true because I know in colleges, professors are terrified of their students. It used to be the professor could kind of say whatever he wanted. Now they're petrified of their woke students, getting them canceled and fired. And the other group that made sure she got out was corporate America. So many of our corporate boards have been taken over by liberals and radical liberals. And so Ulta Beauty had a huge campaign with Teen Vogue, and they also refused to accept her apology, canceled their ad, and the combination of the woke staffers who rebelled against her and the advertiser Ulta Beauty Corporation also removing their campaign from Teen Vogue. Both of those were just too much for her to be able to survive this. So you see, there's this, it's so multifaceted. And so you guys are really going to be the warriors. And I guess my question, I actually have a question of all of you, and any of you can jump in, is, what's it like for you guys? I have an established career. I don't work for ABC. I work for Fox. So I have a little more, leeway of what I can say. I'm kind of in a conservative, safe space. But you guys aren't. And so I wonder what it's like for you in school, what it's like for you on social media. Do you have a presence? Do you feel like you get attacked?
Well, I mean, I can speak a little bit for myself because personally, I have had a lot of attack, I guess you could say. I've actually, I went to high school in upstate New York, and the freshman class there, I was and I'm a clearly Black person, very conservative, Catholic, and people did not like what I believed in. It was a very gay, homosexual school. There were activities going on in the school which I, did not think were appropriate, which I brought to the attention of the school administration, and that, I was the president of the class at the time. I was, I was president of the pro-life club there, as well as president of the freshman class. So I was, pretty prevalent in the school. But after I brought this to the school's attention and, started being more active on my own Instagram profiles, just saying that, like, look, I don't support this homosexual activity. I don't think this is right, especially going on in a public school. So bring it to the attention of the school ended up in a lot of pushback, threats, stuff like that. And I ended up going to a school down in Virginia, a private school the following year, because it became, it got to that level. It came, to that level where my parents were like, okay, this is unacceptable. Wow. This cannot go on. And so they had to make that really difficult decision to have me go down to a school in Virginia. So
was your school a public school?
It was a public school, yes. And it was a tough position because there were a couple private schools in the area, but I have friends who were there and they said it was even worse, even in the private schools there. So it was a very bad and just very wicked situation. But I know that
can I tell you something that's interesting? Because, you know, when we first got on, we talked a little bit about how I was on a reality television show.
Mhm.
And one of the lessons I learned, and this was, you know, 25 years back, and it was a lesson I learned very young at 22 years old when I did that show. And that was the myth of liberal tolerance. And so when I hear your story, what I hear is that other people weren't tolerant of your point of view. And I think that is the kind of thing that we need to really expose. Again, we talked about words. They use the word tolerance. They think they own that word tolerance, and yet they're the most intolerant. Most Christians aren't actually trying to change what liberals are doing. That might have been the case 25 years ago. I think right now most Christians, most Catholics, just want the freedom to believe what they believe without being attacked. They want the freedom to be able to express themselves without being called, you know, transphobic or, you know, insulted or in some way shamed or cast outside of society for living the life that they want to live. And so I think that that's a really important thing for us to continue to bring up, to not let them own that word tolerant when they are so intolerant. And when we talk about diversity, you know, they think diversity is only skin color or sexual orientation, but diversity is diversity of intellectual thought, diversity of religious, you know, ideas and practices. And so, you know, we can't let them own those words. We must hold them accountable to it. If you're going to claim to be tolerant, if you're going to claim to be diverse, then you must include all people, and that includes Catholics, and that includes Christians. And let me tell you this is what they really want. This is the end game. They want to remove Christians and Christian values from the public square. They want what we believe and who we are to be seen as socially unacceptable. And so everyone is either silenced, denies Christ, denies the church, denies their conservative points of view, whatever that is. In order to participate, you have to deny it or never talk about it or censor yourself. We cannot let that be. We cannot let that be. This is a Christian nation founded on Christian values, and whether the liberals, you know, have taken over, you know, in many ways, we still have a place, and we cannot cede the public square to liberals, and we cannot cede the culture to atheists to the point where we are not even allowed to participate. That is what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. Jakob and I have been friends for about like 2 years or so now. We knew each other before we actually started this group together. We founded a pro-life organization on Instagram, but I can confirm what he's saying is true. And we're not talking about like kids holding hands. We're talking about some pretty demonic stuff going on in his public school. But by Providence, by Providence, the high school he ended up going to was like 20 minutes away from where I live. So we got to meet in real life, do Exodus 90 together, and we've become pretty close friends. So
Awesome.
yeah, it was great. I would love to like just keep talking, but Shanta has a question that
Sure.
she wants to ask. So Shanta asks, I'm sorry, I don't know if you mentioned this, but why do you think so many Catholics are into Planned Parenthood? So that kind of connects back to what we were talking about anyways, about culture. So I guess she's kind of asking like, how do you think this has like influenced Catholics so much that to the point we have an organization called Catholics for Choice on Twitter with like 300,000 followers that's that like bishops are basically like not really like endorsing, but kind of like just not doing anything about them, with the exception of Bishop Conley in Lincoln, Nebraska.
So it's funny. Somebody sent me a video today of a Planned Parenthood. They were driving by a Planned Parenthood in Washington, D.C., and they took a video footage and sent it to me. This is an organization with no irony. In front of their building, they had a big Black Lives Matter sign. Imagine that. The organization that is murdering more Blacks because they are disproportionately being murdered by Planned Parenthood as a race, more than any other race, although Hispanics are a close second. And they actually have the lack of shame to hang a Black Lives Matter poster, huge banner, I should say, across their building. Amazing. I think that the Catholic Church has failed in a lot of ways. And I think they failed in terms of catechism. I think, during the pandemic, they failed. I think we will see the result of people having gotten out of the habit of going to church, of families who've stopped going because our own bishops did not think that Mass and the Holy Eucharist were essential. And that is essentially the message that they sent. And back to the original question about Planned Parenthood, of course, they've been very effective in permeating their message, but the Catholic Church has not been very effective in countering it. And case in point is what we're seeing with Joe Biden. Many of the bishops, hated Donald Trump, who, by the way, was the most pro-life president in American history, with all his other faults that people can, talk about for sure. But there is no question that there has never been, not even Ronald Reagan, was, in terms of legislative accomplishments and successes, no one has done more for the pro-life movement than President Trump. And yet the bishops didn't prioritize that. And many of them tacitly endorsed Joe Biden and did not educate their flock on how evil it would be to vote for what we knew was going to be, with the addition of Kamala Harris, the most radical pro-abortion ticket in US history. It was going to be, based on what they promised to do, more radically pro-abortion than even Barack Obama. And you have to try really hard to do that. And they did. And sure enough, in the very first week, he undid virtually every important measure that Donald Trump had put in place to stem taxpayer funding of abortion and many other measures. And remember, during this pandemic, while the bishops didn't fight to make mass attendance essential, Planned Parenthood was deemed by many, many Democrat governors across the United States, as essential. So Planned Parenthood was essential and open and running their butcher mills, but people couldn't go to church and social distance and receive the Eucharist. I blame the bishops and the Pope for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an unfortunate truth, but it is true. And we've had many speakers on who have been some of the only vocal critics of what has been going on in both the United States and Rome. Like, I don't know if you know Bishop Athanasius Schneider. He's a good friend of mine and one of the few people that's been there at every case. We obviously have Bishop Strickland, Bishop Conley, Archbishop Corleone, Archbishop Sample, these guys that they'll speak out every once in a while, but I'm very happy to meet people like these heroes, like Cardinal Zen, like Bishop Schneider, and then it's coming like Bishop Strickland. If anyone else has a question, by the way, be sure to just unmute and jump in.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly comment that this kind of gets back to what was mentioned, what happened, earlier this week when the Vatican, said that the Pope said, no more of a blessing of gay, civil unions and stuff like that, no more giving blessings to them. And White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked the question, in regard to Biden, saying, how does, Biden, who's a Catholic, feel about the Vatican, now saying that they will no longer bless these homosexual unions? And Jen Psaki responded saying that, Joe Biden, he is a very devout Catholic, and he, still holds, he still believes very firmly that in these, in Obergefell case, which which
Right.
legalized the gay marriages and stuff like that. So it was just funny to see that on the one hand, where the Vatican, which we have to submit to as Catholics, has said that you can no longer bless these gay civil unions, and the President of the United States, who's a supposed, devout Catholic, saying that, I am a devout Catholic, but at the same time, I'm going to push these radical abortion agendas. I'm going to, continue to support these, gay civil unions, which is in direct contrast to what the church holds to be.
But that's the fault of the church.
Yeah.
The church never reprimanded him. You've seen a couple good bishops have said, he shouldn't, that have said that basically the Vatican and his own bishop and his own diocese should do something, but nobody ever has. Mm-hmm. And frankly, the church has not shown me that they want to. I think that they would rather have a Democrat in. I believe that. I don't think that that's in any question, because if that was the case, that they, if I was Joe Biden, I wouldn't care what the bishops have to say anyway, because they've never, there's no teeth to anything they say. The only thing that could, possibly, obviously we should all be praying for Joe Biden. Every day we should be praying for Joe Biden, but short of excommunication, I don't see how. He would be the perfect way to set an example. If you are going to claim to be Catholic and devout, and you want to attract and woo the Catholic population in the United States, and you should not be able, you should have to adhere to the church, and the church should be able to at least set these standards. But they have not set these standards for Joe Biden, and Joe Biden flaunts them. So, Jen Psaki's right. Joe Biden doesn't care what they say. There's no consequences to what he does. So, yeah.
Very true.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the few things that she tries not to be upfront about a lot of different issues, and tries to kind of dodge the question for a bit, but to see that this is one of the things that she's so upfront about when it's one of the worst positions of his. It's really sad to see. But Nicholas has a question, and I don't want to stop people from asking questions. So he asks, how do we change this current situation? We know the power of bishops and the Pope, but if they have failed, then what are we called to do as Catholics?
Well, we're living in the era of the laity. If we were to depend on the Pope and our bishops, I think we would not be in good shape. So all we can do, and I say this, as a Catholic, but I also say the same thing to many political conservatives who ask me the same questions. They feel also very disillusioned and lack a lot of hope. After the election loss, and how quickly things are moving in the Biden administration, and all the political wins and advances that they've made in just a few short months. But the same could be applied to what we do within the Catholic Church, because we have definitely been seeing some really, troubling trends in our church. And I think if we depend on bishops or the Pope, we kind of sit back and wait for them to do stuff, that's not going to happen. We're going to get lost. They're not leading us. And this is an era of the laity right now. And I think that it starts in our hearts. It starts in our families. It starts with each one of us. And so I think what we all should be doing is first and foremost praying for our country, praying for the world, praying for a religious revival to come back to the United States, for people to turn to God. And then in our own lives, we are sometimes, we underestimate the light that we put forward, right? We underestimate that people are attracted to people who are leading happy, joyful, meaningful lives. And many people who, don't know God or have rejected God, are very frustrated, and they're searching for meaning. And when they meet people like all of you kids, who are on this Zoom call, when they meet young people like you who have so much purpose, who are so intelligent and informed, who have strength and project that kind of strength, they're attracted to that. They want to know what you're doing. They may on the surface seem to be antagonistic or dismissive, but they're observing you. They're watching you. And remember, they said you will know they are Christians by what you do and how you act and what you say, and but mostly with how you live your life. And so I encourage you all to continue to be strong and know that whether you notice it or not, you're setting an example. Whether you know it or not, people are watching you, and that you're making a difference. I love the story of how you two connected, after this, horrible situation at the high school, and that yet you were only 20 minutes away and you were able to connect with each other, and that you're forming this group. I mean, I think that we just all underestimate how powerful our witness and our examples are to people that we don't even know are being impacted by it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point that you make. And like you said, it is the age of the laity. So it's our job to pick things up where the bishops couldn't, and then try to encourage our bishops to start moving along with the tide. Because if what's going on here is they're scared that that Catholics will be mad if they don't start if they do things like excommunicate Biden, then it's our job to show them that's not where the tide is. The tide's on the opposite side of their church, and definitely push them to start doing those things.
But William,
Shanta,
one more
go
thing
ahead.
about, you guys are too young to probably do this part, but your parents, just like me, can. We also can speak with, our dollars. And so, if you're in a parish that you think is not standing strong, that is not living, living out the church's teachings, stop going there, or at least stop donating, and maybe send what you would give to that parish to a parish that is doing a better job, or a ministry that's doing the Lord's work. So that's another way. I mean, money talks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we tried to push the more traditional side of our Catholicism. So we always try and encourage our members to seek out the Tridentine Latin Mass, seek out the more Orthodox liturgies. Orthodox is a little O, not the Orthodox.
Yeah, I know.
Liturgy. So
how many people are in your group, by the way? How many people subscribe to you?
About 500 or so, give or take.
Awesome.
We're on different platforms, and so we have some people who are on GroupMe, and then other people who are only on Discord or YouTube and stuff like that. So yeah, but we also have a website which also has about 700 people who frequent it. So it's very.
We have 500 on GroupMe and almost 400 on Discord as of right now.
It's so awesome. Yeah.
Good for you guys. Good for you guys. It's so encouraging for me to hear from you. It truly is.
Thank you.
We love talking to you. And so let's see, Shanta has a question here. So we've obviously seen the incidents with the Asian community. So do you have any advice for Catholics and how we should try to advocate for the Asian American community?
Yeah, I guess I've been trying to follow the news and try and be as open-minded about what is, and taking in the news information and not necessarily believing the narratives that are being fed to me. So what's interesting to me in this situation, so first of all, obviously, racism and discrimination is anti-Christian. So none of us should have those thoughts and feelings about other groups in our heart. That's just antithetical to being a Christian. So we'll just lay that right out there. But what I'm hearing that seems like the media doesn't want to pick up on, is that this young person, this young man who gave, who created this violence and killed people and caused so much destruction and pain and hurt, was addicted to sex, that he was addicted to pornography. And so I think that's a topic that a lot of people don't want to talk about. And yet it is such an important topic that, in his case, led him to commit acts of violence. But the way that it manifests itself, most commonly in our culture, is that a lot of young men and women are unable to establish normal, healthy relationships with the opposite sex because they are addicted to porn. And pornography is a very, very serious evil. It's highly addictive. Some studies say it's more addictive than some of the most addictive narcotics out there, drugs. So it's an exploitative, anti-woman industry. It's evil. It's from the devil, no question about it. And yet it's normalized in our culture. In some cases, it's even celebrated in our culture. And I once saw an interview with a producer. Actually, she's Nancy Pelosi's daughter. And she wrote, she did a documentary on the exploitation of young women in the pornography business. And it was a fascinating documentary. And I saw an interview where she was talking about it and all the evils, that had befelled these young girls who fell into it. And yet, as she started her interview, the first thing she wanted everybody to know was that she was not personally against porn. She just wanted us to see all these bad things that happened in the porn industry, but she wanted everybody to know that she was not against porn. And the reason is because in her liberal circles, she did not want to be seen as a prude. She did not want to be seen as anti-porn because that was not hip and cool in her Hollywood leftist political circles that she runs in. I thought, wow, what a weird thing. You just spent how many months of your life following these young girls who had these horrific experiences, were totally being exploited by this industry. And she still didn't have the guts to come out and say something so clear as pornography is as exploitative. It hurts the people viewing it. It hurts the people who are, caught up in this industry. It preys on young girls who have, very bad, home lives and are runaways or in some way addicted to drugs. It is just, it's so exploitative. So that is a piece of the story that I'm waiting to hear more about what happened with the shooting. As far as our Asian brothers and sisters, we love you. And as Christians, we embrace you, and we all are Americans, regardless of the color of our skin.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we
Yeah,
had
and
go ahead,
I
Jakob.
was gonna say that I've been following that story as well, and I've also I was watching the press conference which the police officer gave, who'd interviewed the person who carried out this act of terror, and it seems like the police officer also, he had difficulty responding to the reporters, because the reporters were kind of asking him these questions, and so the reporter was like, was this racially motivated? And the police officer was like, well, no, we haven't seen any evidence for this. And the reporters kept on pushing him because they really want this to be something which is racially motivated. But the police officer, he says, this is not, we have not seen any evidence for it being racially motivated, because the individual did say that he had been frequenting these, the massage parlors for many months now. He had been going to them, frequently, because he had this addiction. And the massage parlor, it wasn't just like this one. There were multiple on the same street, which means that it wasn't really just massages going on there, unfortunately. So obviously there was some something more going on, and it seems like he did have this addiction, and so it's definitely very difficult for everybody involved, because we as the public kind of seeing this, we can only see a little bits of it unless we do our own digging.
Yeah.
And when we dig and we actually watch the interviews which the police officers are giving, it's like, well, unfortunately it's not the way that the media and the reporters want.
Right.
They're reporting it. They're reporting it as this racially motivated attack, when in reality there's something more. And if we just see it as a racially motivated attack, we're not going to be ripping the weed out with the roots. We're going to be leaving the issue there, and the issue there is the sex, it's the porn. That's the problem, and if we don't address that, it's not going to go away.
The same people who are trying to push the racial narrative are the same, because now, of course, they want to say that the opposition political party is white supremacy, right? So they have a political motivation for that. But the same people who are pushing this are the same people who will say that prostitution, which is essentially what was going on in these massage parlors, they are trying to normalize that and call it sex work. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been an advocate of normalizing prostitution. She wants to call it sex work. She wants to unionize them. Completely ignoring the exploitation. No woman wants to be exploited in that way. People find themselves in this work because they feel desperate, because there's a market for it, because it pays well. But we should not, as a society, be normalizing this. It's deeply evil. It's deeply exploitative, and it's bad for our society. And that's why there's just so many ironic angles, and it just is proof for you as young people that you really can't trust the media. You'll have to do so much more of your own research and try and get to the bottom of it, because they're always trying to sell you some narrative, and it's not always based in facts. So I want to tell you guys that I have a very, very, very early morning flight. I'm leaving out to New York tomorrow, so I could probably take maybe one or two more questions.
Yeah, of course. And we're going to end this soon as well, because we do a group rosary at 9:30 Eastern time, which is
awesome.
10 minutes from now. So I do have just one more question. This is just my own question, so I don't think we see any more questions in the chat here. But I'm not sure if you've heard about maybe you have. Probably have Milo Yiannopoulos,
yes.
The whole news story and what he's been doing, coming out as an ex-gay, which this culture sees as being very scary. It's like, this is exactly what they don't want to see, and this is exactly what he's doing. He's coming out ex-gay, saying that this, he's not calling it conversion therapy, but reparative therapy, which he's been under, he's been doing. And so it's just, what do you think of this this whole
great question,
this whole topic of Milo Yiannopoulos going after this? He's always been a very strong conservative, going at the college campuses and stuff like that, but do you have any insight into what he's doing and any support?
So I've always found him to be extremely fascinating. I do follow what he does. I've never met him personally. I find him to be fascinating on a lot of different levels, probably because he is so contradictory in so many ways and so unexpected in so many ways. He also is one of the first people to be canceled by big tech. People forget he was like the pioneer. He was like, before Trump was canceled, they canceled Miley. I don't know what to make of this. I read his statement. Of course, I was fascinated by it, but he is a provocateur. So I just don't know enough about, what's really in his heart and where he's at with it to know if it's real or not, or if it's, I just don't know. He's always, getting our attention and shocking us. And so I would be really dumb to weigh in on that because I just don't know what he's really up to. He just is always trying to surprise everybody. I will say that he scares a lot of liberals, not just because of what he just said, but all along, which is why they wanted to cancel him. He is, just there's a you talked about what it was like to be an African American and a conservative and a Catholic, and I'm a Hispanic. There's a special punishment that people who don't like our point of view have for those of us who dare step out of line or out of the stereotype that they have for what we should think or say. And he definitely, was canceled in a way that really until Donald Trump experienced it a couple months ago. I don't know if any other public figure has been more censored, outcast, thrown out of polite society. I mean, even conservative organizations were afraid to associate with him. So he's a fascinating character. He's constantly pushing the boundaries of polite society. It's been interesting to watch, but I just don't know enough.
Yeah, that's an honest answer, and I'm glad to hear it too. I've been following Milo for a while too, and I just don't know what to make of him. I know Pastor Coffin very well, and he's very close with Milo, but I just can never figure out what to make of him. He's always changing. But we have one more question from Allie. So Allie, if you can go ahead and this will be our last question. Allie, you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
So you were talking earlier about like how much of an issue like normalizing sex work and pornography and everything is. And then also like one of the big social media things right now is like the 97%. And like
what's the 97%?
It's like the statistic that about 90% of women in their lifetime will experience sexual abuse or harassment in some form or another. And so like,
is that a solid 90% of women will experience sexual abuse in their lifetime? Or
97% on like some form of abuse or harassment in their lifetime is the current statistic that's being paraded around. And like, what is a way for us to like be able to respond to it? That's like, I'm a Catholic who like runs social media stuff, and so like being like a Catholic response to that, do you think?
So it seems awfully high to me, to be honest. And again, there are genuine incidents of sexual harassment and of abuse, of course, that exists. But sometimes some people, can feel like, anything can be, a form of sexual harassment. There are many girls, for example, who, we go to co-ed parties and they get drunk and they make bad choices. And then the next day say, well, I, didn't, and they accuse boys of doing things that, they were agreeable to the night before. But the next day they have regret for that hookup. So we have to be careful about what is deemed sexual harassment and what is a rape versus what is a bad decision. Because as women, we know that we no longer have the, used to be girls had to be chaperoned if they went on dates. We don't have that. There used to be chaperones or curfews at universities. Those don't exist anymore. We have a lot of freedom. And with freedom comes responsibility and personal responsibility. And so obviously, I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that anybody has a right to do something to you because you're under the influence, but we must recognize that we live in a very fallen world and that there are dangers out there. And as women, we have to be know that our freedom, our personal freedom, the societal freedoms that so many of us enjoy right now do come with responsibility. If you're sexually harassed, there are obviously, or in any way raped, or in any way someone takes advantage of you in that way, there are places for you to report that, and that should be done. But the 97% sounds awfully high. And I worry about inflating numbers like that, because what we don't want to have is a fear or a war between the sexes. Um, the sexes need each other. Women and men need each other. We should not be afraid of each other in the workplace, or suspicious of each other in the workplace, or in schools, or on in social situations. I think there's feminism has done much to malign men. I think men have actually, especially young modern men, have done a lot towards the advancement of women. So much of what I get to do professionally is because I'm married to a wonderful man who, is helps, in the house, and in the same way, helps me professionally, cooperates with me in terms of how we run our family and our home, and is very much a partner and a team player. And so men have evolved, and don't get far enough credit that they deserve for being the amazing dads that we see now. I mean, if you look at other statistics, like the participation of men in child rearing, in playing with their children, in housework, and all the work around the home, all of these numbers have increased, and we should be celebrating that, and not vilifying men the way that so many feminists in their anti-male rhetoric have done. The sexes need each other. The human race needs male and female to love each other and procreate, and keep the human race going. And God made us equal and complementary to each other. And so I worry that statistics like that are inflated might do more to create fear and barriers and suspicion between the sexes, rather than cooperation between the sexes, and love and trust and friendship. So that's my thought on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I also do want to reaffirm Ali's point, though, also just about the damage that like our culture has for the ones that are real. Although the 97% may be like off, for the ones that are real, the effects that our culture has had on that, and how much it's influenced that. But I don't want to keep you any longer. We have Rosary in Rosary in like 5 minutes. You have a flight tomorrow. So with that, Ms. Campostapi, will you close us in a prayer before you go?
Sure. Are you going to lead the prayer, or you want me to lead the prayer?
Will you lead it, please?
Oh, sure. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord Jesus, I ask that you continue to bless this amazing group, this Zoom group of young people who are using technology and culture to spread the message of your church in a very broken world. We need courageous young people like this to lead our church, to lead our country, and to use their intelligence and their compassion and their love to help us lead our country forward. We know that we're living in a world that is trying to throw you out of it, Lord Jesus. And it is young people like this who will bring you back into the forefront of our minds and our hearts, and our policies and our culture, and in our families. So I want to thank not just these kids, but the wonderful parents who raised these amazing young people to be so courageous, and to be your voice in a culture and in a youth culture that so desperately needs it. We ask this in your name, and we pray through your mother, the Virgin Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and in the hour of our death. Amen. Jesus, I trust in you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.